informal economy workers. I think we know that this is actually a challenge where you find that those in the informal sector are usually not covered by social protection. But we have, of course, good practices, for example, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, in Myanmar, where they actually extend contributions to those in the informal economy workers. So we also need to consider how we can extend social protection to those in the informal sector. Then finally, as we summarize, move on to the next slide. Yes, I'll call Rebecca, my colleague, my co-presenter, to just summarize the two slides for us, and then Nelson to summarize the last two slides. Thank you. Yes, summarize what she's just gone through. And my name is Rebecca, Kabugo from Uganda, Social Security, NSSF Uganda. So in summary, in terms of extension of public social security systems to migrant workers, Nisi has just told us that there's a growing trend among countries of origin. That COOs increasingly, but not limited to, but to a limited extent, are able to extend their social security systems to migrant workers abroad at that time. And we have seen, she's also mentioned there's a growing trend in African countries of origin, and given us a very good example of the Philippine example, with Philippines Overseas Employment Administration and Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, which are we have seen and heard from our Philippine colleagues that are able to extend country of origin welfare programs to their people when they're abroad. Secondly, the comparison between contributory and non-contributory benefits. There have been studies indicating that while several contributory benefits, in particular pensions and validity benefits, are extended abroad, it's not the same case for non-contributory public social security benefits. For example, you find that some people are able to experience maybe unemployment benefits in their country of origin, but when they go to different countries, they can't enjoy the same benefits. Whilst for some that are contributory, like maybe pension, somebody might continue contributing even when they move to another country, and that is extendable. Thirdly, special schemes, especially those of health. At times, however, special dedicated schemes are created to cover migrant workers abroad, for example, to grant access to health care for the individuals concerned and even for their families while in their countries of origin. And then lastly, challenges in comprehensive coverage. Currently, COO insurance-based arrangements rarely extend comprehensive and sufficient social security coverage to migrant workers and their families, and this may require separating social security extension from broader aspects of social protection interventions. This also flows from the fact that given their broad sweep and limited funding basis, migrant worker programs and migrant welfare packages may not be able to cover many key aspects of social security. Next. We also discuss some of the challenges in the extension of social security programs, and the first one is institutional and operational challenges. Nevertheless, several challenges may impede the extension of COO social security measures, and these include weak development and social security systems in some COOs, the absence of the mandate to cross borders with your laws and governance systems, and the need for strong and coordinated institutional framework and effective operational arrangements. Secondly, the need to align with COD social security systems, extending COO. I hope we all know what COO and COD means. I know that they're easy jargons, but yeah, okay. Extending COO social security arrangements requires the consideration of a range and adequacy of social protection benefits available in the COD so as to avoid dual, no overlaps, or social security coverage. COOs have to decide on the social protection risks that should be provided for via insurance-based arrangements, bearing in mind the reality of the SP context in the COO, with reference to the scope of SP provisioning and technical and operational capacity in the country of origin. Next, the portability of benefits. Ensuring portability of social security benefits from COD as well as from COO is very crucial as an intervention. For example, bilateral agreements sometimes include provisions to transfer pension rights and other social security benefits back to the COO upon a worker's return. And then lastly, bilateral agreements and practical implementation, assistance with a paying social security benefit on behalf of the CAO or verifying conditions for making of payments by CAO may be provided for in a bilateral agreement. Agreements that can enable CAO to assist in paying out benefits while the migrant worker is still abroad, simplifying the process for both the worker and institutions. Provisions like this can be provided for in BLAs for the different countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And lastly, for gender balance, Nelson, please, thank you.
Speed.
Next slide.
Now, this is the summary of the Model E, and that first part continuation of what we have heard from our colleague. We have a well-managed, publicly arranged social protection. Provision may have advantage over the private insurance. So we may not consider the private insurance, but that one, the well-managed publicly, will actually be good for migrant workers and also that. Now, extending the reach of public and national systems of social security to also accommodate migrant workers. So we will have to streamline the migrant worker social contribution in compliance to eligibility criteria. Who will be eligible to it, and can they withdraw those funds if they come, if they are back to the country, irrespective of whether the migrant workers in the country of origin or in the country of destination. So that one will actually ensure that there is continuous continuation of social security coverage for the migrant the benefits of the workers in it's actually ensured. Now, we have compulsory coverage, may strengthen social security coverage of the migrant workers abroad. When we ensure that these migrant workers is contribution to the social security is compulsory, or is actually well captured, then it will actually be good because we shall have dual coverage of the challenges and it will be overcome. Now, almost the last part, there is an evident need to address the gender gap in assessing the social security programs by adopting careful design of the context-sensitive gender-responsive intervention. We have had maybe many women are actually benefiting of this. I think that is what we had yesterday, but we'll have to have be addressing the gap of the assessing the social security. Now, these interventions have to go beyond the gender neutral arrangement and may require specialized measures to address the gender-specific social program deficiencies in the areas of pension, provision, and the social programs for unpaid care work. In concluding this, there is in concluding and implementing bilateral and multilateral agreements, gender-responsive consideration should be needed. So,
last slide, please.
Now, continuation of that, we have of a particular importance arrangements aimed at facilitating portability of benefits. Other social security coordination principles may have to be implemented. So there is retention of membership of country of origin social security schemes should also be seen as a priority intervention to ensure seamless continued social programs coverage for workers abroad. So they should not be exempted once they move out. There should actually be a continuation of, they should retain their membership in their original country. Now, country of origins also should also advocate for inclusion of the migrant workers, including women migrant workers, in the public social security systems of the country of the destinations, because we have issues like maternity. That's one affects mostly the women, so they should actually access that in the country of destination. That is what we are advocating. More can be done to provide protection to families of migrant workers abroad, and in particular families staying behind the country of origin, so that those who are left behind do not feel that they have been left by those who are going out. In particular, consideration should be given to ensuring that dependents and survivors' benefits, as well as families' benefits, are extended to them. So this is actually very important for those who are dependent on the migrant worker and also survivors. In case the migrant worker dies abroad, then the survivors can also benefit through the social program, social security program. Migrant workers engaged in informal economy in the country of destination usually lack special coverage on the country of destination and often can also not benefit from the country of origin. So the effect that we are those who are working in informal low-skilled workers in that case. As even informal economy workers in the country of destination may not be sufficiently covered. However, in the basis of substantial and growing comparative evidence, the country of origin should contemplate introducing social programs coverage, interventions for informal economy workers, bearing in mind the wider range of measures and supportive arrangements that are available to achieve this outcome. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, my co-presenters. In closing, because of our time, we're supposed to do a group activity, but anyway, this is just for your reflection. In your view, in your country, which challenges present themselves when the introduction or extension of insurance-based social security arrangements for the benefit of workers abroad and their families is contemplated? Consider the advantages and challenges, in your opinion, of establishing a separate, dedicated social insurance scheme versus using the existing national social security scheme to extend social protection to workers abroad and their dependents. How should the government of your country go about to incorporate gender-sensitive and gender-responsive measures into the social security system of the country for the benefit of your workers from your country abroad and their family members? Which specific social security provisions to be designed, adjusted, or achieve this objective? This is for your own reflection, and we can discuss this over lunch. I think we are done. Thank you so much. Asanteni.
Sana.
Presenters, Netzanet and Inisia. Repeat it, please. Yes. So I would like to invite, with the honor and privilege, Mr. Ivan Wandera to come and chair this session. Members, you have all the time up to the next 1 hour to really ask and be clarified on the two modules because they are very critical to the cause why we are here, namely establishment and matters of insurance-based schemes. And the attention of the Philippines official with us, please feel free also to clarify during this session on some of the, we know you have a substantive presentation tomorrow, but still, since we are talking about establishment, please feel free to come in and be able to respond to these colleagues, and we get clarified on those two modules. So over to you, Ivan. The 1 hour begins now.
Okay, thank you so much, Innocent. Good morning, colleagues. Ivan Wandera, my name's from IOM Uganda, and I'm glad to be here. And also, I would wish to take this opportunity to thank you for keeping up to this stage. You know, it's quite challenging to have all of us here, but at least if you really observe that in some of the trainings, you find some of the seats are left vacant after some given session. Is it true?
Yeah.
Especially the first sessions. So for those who left us, we really want to extend our gratitude on day one, but then still, day two, we are still okay and we are still full. So I would maybe wish you clap for yourselves for making it up to this level. From our previous presenters,
Sanet, thank you so much, and Nisia. Actually, I think why colleagues are quiet, you didn't ask them whether we are together, like our colleague did.
We are at par.
So, at par, yes. So if I'll take this opportunity, I will also ask you, were we together by that time? Okay, Innocent has accorded us enough time that we are going to use to ask questions. And I think one of the things that most of the colleagues had, also while communicating to my colleagues, the delegates from Uganda, I did mention that this is an experience sharing and a learning session. So most of us came here with a view to learn from one another and also exchange. So Uganda and Kenya, we're privileged also to have people from Philippines and other countries, and also the colleagues who are here with us. So I want to take this opportunity to invite the questions that are going to be coming through. But you remember, as we were doing the first presentation, that was from Nestanet. It was about the establishment of the migrant welfare program. And that was our first session that she did, module, it was module D. It was module D. So we looked at different sections, and of which one of the sessions that I really felt like really wanted us to focus on from my side is the migrant welfare source of funding. So she talked of so many different things, but of course we'll look at the mix of, she talked of the mix of finance sources, the national governments to help establish the migrant welfare funding and the funding sources. Yesterday, Edwin was here. He did mention how them as migrant workers, they have tried to do this kind of funding. You know, we come up so many times with different programs, but normally what fails us is the implementation. And the implementation doesn't mean that we do not have the knowledge or the capacity to do this, but it all comes with a funding bit. So we might have a vast number of programs, but what normally challenges us is the funding gap, okay? So from us, as we reflect from what the presenters told us, we need to think of the funding sources. And I remember she talked of the migrant workers' contribution, as I do reflect from our colleague Edwin, what he did mention, and also the recruitment agencies. Now, from here, in this room, we know we have different capacities, and we're coming from different entities. Could be government institutions, could be the private workers, and maybe the migrant voice, for the case of Uganda. Then the question is, how willing are these recruitment agencies towards the contribution of the funding? So we know that we are trying to put this together, but normally what fails us is the funding gap. So to enable this run, what are we going to advocate from our countries where we are going back to? Are we willing to talk to these people about this program? But then, can we kindly share with them the funding bit of it? Contribution capacity of migrant workers. Yes, as it has been surfacing from different colleagues, we do understand that sometimes the migrant workers do not really want to associate themselves with the issue of funding. You know, like giving in some small remittances towards achieving some of these programs. But a colleague did mention that they are the most affected ones. Okay? So, you find someone has lost a loved one, but it is a tug of war to get their remains back to the country. And yes, indeed, we do understand as in an African setting that having a decent burial is so important for an individual. So how are we going to convince these colleagues to ensure that themselves take part in all, they have that responsibility towards contributing to this, this kind of call? More still, maybe if I could jump onto the module D.
Excuse me, Mr. Ines.
Sorry?
Excuse me, Mr. Wandela.
Yes, please.
Are you trying to guide our commentary, or we should
Yes.
give you
Actually, just to cut you short, I'm just trying to give a reflection of the previous presenters before we can usher in the questions and answers. You know, it's been quite a different, a lengthy discussion or presentation, I would say, but we can't just jump straight to the question and answers. Yes, so just a mind of reflection, then the session will be opened for the questions and answers. Like Innocent guided also, we have the colleagues or the lecturers, I would say, within still the room, so it will guide the answering of the questions, and we get first-hand information or answers from the different participants. So just to talk about the last presentation from this year, she gave us, she presented about the issuance board arrangements. That was module E, which we stand on, and she talked of the dedicated frameworks, the modalities for exchanging of, from the countries of origin, issuance space, and then also the gender-sensitive and gender-responsive interventions. You know, most of these interventions, they do focus on, if we talk of the gender, we are looking at the female gender. But from a GBV perspective, we come to realize that it's not only the female gender that are facing a lot of violations. So for the male who are here, you will agree with me that some of these violations from the male perspective go unnoticed, but they are really happening. So the participants, I would like to take this opportunity to invite us to open the floor for their questions and answers, and then we can receive the questions that will be directed towards the responsive or respective lecturers who gave us their presentations. And I think we have enough time, like they mentioned. So I would request also we be brief while asking our questions so that they can be easily answered or understood. I think from that, the session is open, so we can take the first question from Kayonde.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Ivan, and the previous presenters. For me, I've got a bit more commentary to make. You give me some 1 minute or two to bring
It's
them
going
on.
to be brief, no?
Yes. I was wondering, as you come up with this proposal, I think at this point we should look at the barriers or the way to go about the possible challenges in stopping what we are trying to propose. How do we go about the challenges within the presentation in order to tailor what we want to come up with? I think we should have a candid discussion about that in the way forward. Then one presenter was talking about the way, what can be provided, the services. There is something that is commonly being mentioned as return and reintegration. We, in the field of labor migration, we find a challenge in assisting somebody who is vulnerable, a double vulnerable person, is vulnerable at being unemployed, and at the same time is vulnerable at being exposed to where he's going to be, or he can potentially be employed. So this person, you may plan for to say, we are coming up with a program for whoever is crying the other side, we shall repatriate and reintegrate. There is that excitement in quickly saying, she has complained, let us return her. What if she doesn't want? What if she returns and you find her getting actually more worse in the situation of return without maybe support packages? Because you'll find that these people, as they go, they come back and find situations even worse than. Is the program ready to give enough package to actually enable these workers, these vulnerable beneficiaries, when they return, to give them a complete support that they will never again think of remigration? So how sustainable is that? What do we have to integrate in to mitigate that element that whoever is a beneficiary of this program, really when you bring in the element of a package after you have returned, if you are not limping or having a permanent damage, what next? Are we not trying to promote something like a tendency of laziness, whereby if you promise people, when you go there and you have an issue, we shall just what? Return you and give you money. So how are we going to mitigate such a thing? I don't know if you get my point.
I do get you.
Then I want to leave that. Then there is also another aspect on objectives. As a voice for the workers, I always want to bring it now and again. The way we emphasize the point of gender in all aspects, these days there is also that point of environmental protection, greening. It is everywhere, scattered in all. So we should also begin, as migrators and laborers, we should begin not to exclude the element of workers, in your objectives, in the objectives in this proposal, the aspect of inclusion of migrant workers at all levels as stakes in decision, in action, in practice, and all that is key, because you look like you are proposing an insurance. You can even insure matchbox. You can insure a container of goods which you don't talk. So you don't talk of insurance and you just assert it on human being. Insuring a human being is something else. You are insuring something, somebody who has rights, somebody who has blood. Just know you are insuring like an egg, which is fragile and it can break any day. So when it comes to insurance, the element of humanity should carry the face in these labor welfare programs we are developing. So when we talk about this insurance, should we not consider the workers having to understand, to actually believe in and accept and carry it themselves, even they require it themselves before you compel them. They find a need by themselves to have that kind of package. I hope you are taking note. Then I have also a proposal that since Uganda and Kenya are proposing to pilot this program, what if the two delegations go back home? Because it is shameful to talk about developing a welfare program geared to go and open up bilaterals with Gulf countries when we have no single bilateral between Uganda and Kenya. Do we have a labor bilateral? Can we learn model? Is it so hard? We have had many Ugandan girls crossing to Kenya to do house what? Is that true or not? The fact is, they are paid peanuts in Uganda. And the fact that our economies are not the same, there are those who find better employment in Uganda and are from Kenya. There are those who come to Kenya and can get more money. So can we develop a working model, a bilateral, and even bring in this welfare arrangement to see how it works on our local, our regional arrangement? Let the two delegations go back and report it to their ministers. Then the ministers begin lobbying and lay us a sample of such a bilateral which speaks about social welfare before we call upon the Gulf states to also give it to us. Okay. Another one, the nature of a fund to include all, including the insurance. I mean, this fund, I think it should be a provident fund that includes the insurance element. We shouldn't be talking to be separating these two, the insurance and then the other welfare part. If it is a fund, because part of this fund, the money will be used into the assistance programs, the other side, the deployment, the training, the whatever. The teams that will be coordinating may use part of this fund to accomplish whatever that is required within the welfare program. Now, our aim should look at how we make this fund a comprehensive fund and then lay what it can do and what remains for investment and what does what for an insurer to also give his package. That's my proposal. Lastly, sir, before you switch me off, yes, I'm giving the last submission, unless you want to leave it out, and then we go limping.
Carry on, please.
Yes. Yes. Now, migrant workers governance, she talked about the informalities or workers in the informal sector may not easily access this kind of program once it is piloted. Migrant workers governance. I always bring that thing to bring our attention to understand that even we coming here, there was some kind of leadership that we followed. So we are expecting people who are informal that we can't avoid taking, because the recruitment agencies cannot avoid taking those people who don't even qualify, because their aim is after numbers. They don't care. And if governments don't come up to say that we want you to follow these regulations before you deploy so that we protect under escrow recruitment, those people don't care. They would carry anything, whether you are mad or whatever. So you find that people in the informal or the informals will end up in that line. And here is the program we are developing, which we don't want to see it excluding. You see, it must cater for all. Therefore, the governance of such people, putting a leadership arrangement, regulations to these migrants is key for you to track on them. For them, if they must access these programs, they can use that leadership channel, that sense of belonging, to always access whatever they can't within their informalities. But if that is not there, how do you then expect them to claim when they don't even have any governance structure? I submit.
Thank you. Nesia, closer to you. We'll hope to respond to some of these queries or your concerns, and they're well noted. But then also,
you are targeting me.
yeah, I knew. But it's okay. Maybe before you could respond, I just wanted also to give something, just to give a small highlight of what I noted, what can be done to, what can be provided or services on the return and reintegration. Initially, the return and integration process, when it comes to IOM, we are considering the handouts. Actually, some of them were given some startup capital, and also given some other handouts, such as the beehive, court fee, and stuff. That is for the case of Uganda. I don't know from the case of Kenya, but I think our implementation is not so much quite different. But then, currently, the return and integration, of course, when we look at the integration bit of it, we're looking at someone being given that platform to get home and also reintegrate into the community with less intentions of repatriating or going back. So what we are doing is upskilling, reskilling, and internship placements. So how do we do this? We are into liaison with different TVETs. Those are technical, vocational, educational, and learning institutes. And then we support the returnees to upskill them. If they have the different skills, what can they be done to enable them get into the community or fit in? We do realize that some of them go with some education, but because of the scarcity of jobs within the country, and they look for greener pastures. But then upon reaching there, like you said, we find some of them are not happy about the conditions they face. But then as IOM, what we're trying to do, we work with the ministry and different sectors, especially the Ministry of Gender, to identify some of these returnees. So we do the placements, and we coordinate with the different events, and we do the upskilling. That aside, we also look for different placements. Could be like, for example, in hotels and different agencies, whereby we put these people there. We support them to be given internship placements. It could be for 6 months or whatsoever months, and they get some small salary. But of course, important to note is the psychological bit of it. We do the counseling and guidance and also through our different teams. So that alone is one of the key issues that we do ensure to make to enable these people not to think of going back, because you're right about someone coming home and going abroad. When they get a challenge, they come here. Some of them might use it as a leeway to get placements. But then what are we looking at? We look at upskilling, reskilling, and also counseling and guidance. But we're no longer giving handouts, because handouts tomorrow, someone is also going to do the same just to get the capital. But this is not ideal of what we are looking at. So, Nesia, if you're ready, maybe you could give a response on that.
Excuse me, Mr. Innocent. That point is very important. Yes. I'm sorry to come again. I want to ask you, good, you have done everything as IOM or any other party, but have you become the national reintegration and whatever center? Now, there are people who return that never know a IOM that exists to do that. In Uganda or Kenya, they may not know you. They may not know Migrant Workers' Voice. These are just dropped on board. They return home. They land in different destinations. How do we design a program, a center that comes to get about that? The other element that we were suggesting, how about if we dwell more on offering assistance of the distressed on site than targeting the return and what? Because though that person you are reintegrating is coming back into the very poverty, the very unemployment, before you know, she will be seeking to go back, and she faces the same things the other side. She calls here again. So how about if we design something that really either negotiates for those countries to really understand when our own are in distress, they can give way for negotiation. Because in labor, somebody can get a dispute. How do we handle these labor disputes on site? That the program should be catering for that. And this is the purpose for sending coordinators. How do we pave them a way to always listen in when our own need someone to talk to? It curbs and limits the numbers of returnees who are returning into the abject poverty to continue the same chain. I think that's the best way, that this program should look at how do we make sustainable a person who made a decision using her right to migrate to utilize it better and come back when he is safe.
Okay, that's well noted. And like I said, yes, all these are programs which are underway, and that's why we're doing the migrant welfare program. Some of these suggestions, we are here to do the skeleton bit of it, but of course they will be included into some of the programming. But currently, what is on ground, we are looking at what the agencies are doing towards curbing or facilitating the return and integration, which is one of the programs that we are having at hand. Okay? So I think that answers you. But yes, what you mentioned is really taken into considerations, and of course we're here with different partners just to understand some of these technicalities or challenges that different migrants might be going through. So, but of course, you see some of these things, when we come to the identification of some of these colleagues who are having issues, I heard Kenya talking about the one-stop center, right? Yes, they do have the one-stop center. And this is something that we are working with the Ministry of Gender from Uganda and the Interreligious Council to identify a space whereby some of these categories can be supported. So, as I said, like, it's something that we are really working on, and it is in progress, but I cannot say that it's already working. But I think Kenya, maybe someone from Kenya, can give a highlight of some of these return and integration, how you guys are handling this from the Kenyan perspective. But that is what we have for Uganda.
Chair, yes. I wanted to comment. I don't know if you're debating so much. We were to talk about the fund.
Yeah. Yeah, the fund, but of course there are some of the issues that come,
yes,
and we really can't leave them unanswered. Yeah.
That's fine. On the issue of the benefits or what you can offer, you really need to sit down as a country with your different stakeholders. That is what also we did for Kenya. We looked at what problems are our migrant workers facing. Then now we sat down with the various stakeholders, because for us we have already finalized on our policy framework. So we sat down with the different agencies, we looked at what problems and what can the fund address. So it's not something that one entity can decide that then we will offer distress or we'll offer repatriation or whatever. But you have to decide as a country, what do you want to offer? What do you want the fund to solve? What do you think is beneficial to the migrant workers? But then at the same time, be in consultation with the migrant workers and the returnees on what exactly is on the ground. Because for us, we held various virtual meetings with the diaspora in the different regions, so that we can just get their insights on what they feel about the fund. Because more, especially the skilled ones who have already settled in those countries with dual nationality, most of them didn't want to be part of the fund because they were like, they are already covered by the social protection schemes in those countries. And then, but I had a question to my colleague from Philippines, or not my colleague, the colleague from, the representative from Philippines. My question would be on how do you do the contributions for government, for the private recruitment agencies, for the migrant workers? Is it a one-off? How are the contributions done? And then in terms of benefits, for us, we have a very big basket of benefits we are intending to offer. So how do you finance those benefits within the contributions that are made by the three entities? Is it done by the fund only, or do you have other institutions that then support some of the provision of some of the benefits? And then also just to note to one of the issues that you're asking, the fund, that's how we thought of on the Kenyan side, it's not supposed to be a social, a long-term social security, social protection program. It's a short term. It's supposed to just cushion you, when you're in distress or when you're suffering. Then now you can progress to, because of the liquidity and the contributions per making, it's not able to give you a long-term, like for example, integration for a long-term integration program. For us, we put it as a short-term benefit. So we're looking at giving you maybe a one-off, if you come back and you're sick, maybe we give you a one-off, check to support you, but then now you need to be integrated into the health support systems for the country. So what we're looking at is, as we provide the short-term benefit, we also create awareness for the migrant workers to get into the national social protection schemes that are in the country. So then you don't bombard the fund with a lot of responsibilities which they can't be able to fulfill. Thank you.
That's good.
All right, thank you so much. Maybe I just want to, I think my colleague actually covered issues of reintegration, so I will not cover that, or maybe Nessa will actually elaborate on that. I just want to focus on where you were talking about the voice of workers in the informal sector and their inclusion in terms of participation, in terms of decision making. I think you are the voice of migrant workers, so you are really concerned about their voice. I think inclusion and participation of migrant workers, whether they're in the informal sector or formal sector, is actually a key principle. Participation is a key principle in terms of human rights. So I think as we frame our extension of social protection to informal workers in the informal sector, we need also to consider that principle because extension of social protection to those in the informal sector is actually context specific. So like we highlighted earlier on, it depends on the context because we also need to understand how the scope and also the content of our social protection, how we need also to extend it to those in the informal sector. So it's context specific, it varies from country to country, and of course participation and inclusion is actually a key principle. And I think we also need to consider it as we frame social protection. Then regarding issues of, we also, I think, highlighted issues around gender. Yes. Yes, yeah, when we talk of gender, we are not talking of women's issues, but we know it becomes a women's issue because of, the past, the long term, the inequalities that we have when we talk of gender issues, and especially in the labor market. So that's why when we are presenting, we are talking of women in unpaid care work, unpaid domestic work, because we want to address the gender inequalities that are there, that have been there. Because how many of you men actually do unpaid care work? I think research has actually showed that less than 5% of men are engaged in unpaid care work. So you find that most of the unpaid care work is done by women. Is that not a fact? And we actually double it, or we do paid work, we also do unpaid care work. So that's why when we talk, we look at the gender consideration. You'll find out that it's more, we are focusing on more around women because we want uh, to address the gender inequalities that have been there for long, and it's still there. Um, then, lastly, I think you talked about how we can tailor the challenges into recommendations. And I think this is a learning workshop for each of us, for everyone here. That's why we are here, we are learning. We're just highlighting this, that these are the challenges. But of course, it's also country specific. We need to see how we then change, make these challenges actually actionable. How can we turn these challenges into implementation or proper recommendations? I think once working in government, we are always talking about these challenges to say governments, we are not implementing policies, we are not implementing programs because maybe of resources, technical capacity. Those are the challenges that we always talk of, but I think it's high time we need to have concrete actions. And also, even as we go back to our countries, we sit down and see how we can turn these challenges actually into implementation.
The regional labor market, BRA for the regional.
Which one?
BRA is for the regional, the two.
Okay, you were talking about the BLMs between Kenya and the Uganda. Yeah, this one I think I will ask Edwin. Uh, yeah, I think it was addressed, yeah?
Is it also meandering like those ones? Operationalize it, let's move.
So that one I think I leave it to the Kenya and the Ugandan colleagues. Nathan, over.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with integration assistance the migrant welfare could provide. The migrant welfare program could provide reintegration assistance when the repartment
The voice has gone?
sorry. A migrant welfare program could provide reintegration assistance when migrant workers repatriated during emergencies or crisis situation, or when they finish the contract and return back home. But when we say reintegration assistance, we don't mean handing them out, assistance or transfer. It is to mean that we avail the means for them to stand on their own. It can be attached with business skill training, financial skill training, or any other assistance. So they will not like slip back and depend on the handout of the program. But again, the decision to include reintegration assistance or not in a specific program depends on the context. It may be priority to Uganda, it may not be priority to Uganda, but it should be informed by migrant workers' best interest and need and in the specific context. Let me show you an example. I was working poverty alleviation program, and the program really provides transfer to poor and vulnerable people and to get them out of poverty. But that wasn't enough because they may slip back to poverty once the transfer stops. But that program was complemented by a livelihood pathway program, which support beneficiaries with different livelihood pathways to select from over various kinds of livelihoods, so that they get like business skill trainings, financial literacy trainings, income generating activities trainings. So they will be assisted with this kind of trainings together with initial capital to start their own business and to start on their own. So again, the decision depends on specific context and migrants workers' based interest and needs. And regarding the governance of the migrant welfare itself, and respect to especially migrant workers in irregular situation, it requires a decision
States.
by state or any authority, whether to include them in the program or not. It may be difficult to reach them because they don't have any documentation, they may not be known to the authorities. So a decision has to be made whether to include them or not. But it is important to note here that we need a legal framework to ensure the good governance of the program together with the supervisory institution. Thank you, and over.
Correct.
Thank you, Nathaniel, for the clarity. Over to you. The colleague was asking, how do you make the contributions? Is it a one-off or? And then also she also asked about the finance. How do you finance the benefits in regards to your country?
Yeah, thank you. Before I go to that, just a quick point on reintegration. I agree that we have to be practical and realistic about reintegration. In a 2-year contract, when you go back, nothing much would change in the situation of where you came from. So it was difficult establishing a business 2 years ago. You know, what expectation do you have that it would be easier? So for us, for me personally, remigration should always be an option. If you can find the, the displaced worker or the distressed worker job while he or she is still on site, and if you can ensure that there is adequate protection, then I think that would be a more realistic option. Now, just make sure that you have a roster of fair and ethical recruitment agencies and employers who will be who will be providing adequate protection to the worker and who will be undergoing a rigorous vetting process to make sure that he or she won't fall into the same trap that he or she fell into in the first place. So that's one. Second, uh, one aspect of reintegration, and it's tied into a number of other layers, no? But one important thing would be for us in government to help them quickly recover their back wages or the benefits that they should be getting, because that would help tide them over. The usual failure of all, because even before I was in government, we were implementing reintegration programs. The main failure of a reintegration program would be if you provide them with either capital or with goods, they would use it for their daily lives, not for business, because they don't have the money to tide them over. The money that could tide them over would be the salaries and back wages that the employers or the agencies owe them. So it's up to us to come up with a system for quick recovery of those wages. They shouldn't wait for more than half a year to be able to do that. So there should be a mechanism for that. And that would help ensure that your reintegration approach would be sustainable and effective, whether it's re-employment or livelihood. On the issue of our welfare fund, we have a very old welfare fund. It's called the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration. It was established in 1977. Most of us were, I was already born then, but most of you were probably born in 1977. So it's an old fund. It was established through, initially there was a government seed money that was provided to it. I'm trying to find out how much it was, but it was a little less than $1,000 worth of money right now. But of course, it's 1977, so that would have cost a lot back then. But I'm trying to compute for my presentation tomorrow how much that money is worth now. But there's a seed money from government, and then workers contribute directly to the fund. If you are an agency hire, it's tied into your overseas employment certificate, which is like the exit clearance that we provide. If you don't have that and you will be working overseas, our immigration officials won't allow you to leave the country. So it's tied into that document. So workers would have to pay for that, and agencies, the recruitment agencies, would have to make sure that they pay for that. In some instances, it's the responsibility of the employer or the recruitment agency to pay, to remit the welfare contribution. So the welfare contribution is, the membership contribution is valid for 2 years, the usual term of the contract, and then they can renew. It's membership based, so some services cannot be accessed if you're not an active member. And it's correct, no, the welfare fund is not supposed to be a magic bullet for all of the needs of the worker. So tomorrow I'll present the range of benefits and the schedule of benefits that the workers can get from that particular fund, but it's complemented by we have legal assistance fund for workers, which is government funded, and even OWA itself, it manages some portion of money from the national government. So it's not just while the personality of OWA, the welfare fund, is not government, it's not entirely private also because the employees are public servants. It's operating based on a charter. It has its own charter. And the good thing, I think one thing that I can share about OWA right now is that its board of trustees have workers representatives in it. So there's land-based and sea-based overseas Filipino workers who are represented in the board of trustees. And the trustees are the ones who approve the budget. They tell the secretariat where they should be putting the money, what types of programs, how much they should be allocating, what should be the manner of implementation. So the trustee is that powerful. Um, Also, so they have a trust fund which is membership based, and they also manage funds from the national government. For example, repatriation is a service provided by the national government. If the private employment agencies and the employers cannot do it, we shoulder the repatriation. But we don't get it from the funds of the welfare, from the welfare fund, because it will be depleted if you just, how much is a one-way ticket? It's around, in the Philippines from Saudi Arabia, it's around $800 already. So, but I'll be sharing more about the fund. But the point is, the fund should not be a magic bullet for all of the services that we want to draw up. It should be based on, and we should be modest in terms of our expectation, and we should be allowing the fund to grow. Last thing, which I might not be able to tackle tomorrow, we invest the fund. The fund is invested. The board determines where the funds are invested, mostly in very secure financial investment, stocks, government bonds, but it's invested and it's part of the performance metric for the public officials here. It's part of the performance metric of the administrators of the fund, and even us. We have a certain percentage to hit to allow to hit so that we can justify if we will be getting performance-based bonus, for example, or if we will be retaining our jobs. So it's part of the performance metrics of those who are in charge of managing the fund. So yeah, tomorrow I'll be providing a more in-depth look into the welfare fund. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. As we are coming to the next questions, Edwin wanted to just give a brief highlight and clarity about the BLF.
Yes, the migrant workers' voice spoke and asked the kind of arrangement we have between Kenya and Uganda. And most of arrangements that we have, bilateral ones for Kenya and Uganda, and indeed most of the East African community partner states, are mostly couched within the ESC Common Market Protocol. And these target skilled labor, so professional categories in some selected sectors, as guided and agreed by the partner states. For example, the partner states have agreed on mutual recognition arrangements or agreements for the partner states targeting 4 sectors: so architects, I think engineers, veterinarians, and the fourth one I'm not very sure. I have to confirm, but I would think it's accountants. So those 4, and the partner states have agreed to that already. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, most of the skilled labor is very well covered in terms of bilateral arrangements, including social protection and portability of earned benefits for that matter. It's the lower skilled migrant workers that do not benefit from this. And the migrant welfare systems or funds mostly target these uncovered migrant workers. You will see the 4 professions, so the accountants, the architects, the engineers, veterinarians. I would assume both countries, and indeed most of the ESC countries, have their engineers board that have regulations on qualifications. Same for accountants, we have the same for Kenya. Same for architects, we have a very well regulated board that looks at who is registered, the qualification, and this is done every year. So these boards sit and agree, do you have these qualifications? Can we consider this in Uganda because they are the same anyway? So it is much easier to facilitate those bilateral arrangements between the ESC partners based on the ESC Common Market Protocol, and because of the existence of that board or those boards that regulate the practice of these very well-structured professions. So we have to start somewhere with the migrant welfare funds, and progressively, maybe based on what will be agreed to be implemented by the two countries and what should be covered in the migrant fund, welfare funds, then those lower skilled migrant workers coming to Uganda from Kenya or Tanzania or Rwanda would then be able to benefit from the migrant welfare fund that will be established in Uganda or in Kenya for that matter. It's the inclusiveness or inclusivity that we are looking for with the migrant welfare fund for this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for the clarities. I think we are still taking in questions, but I do request kindly let us be brief, much as we are given enough time, but at least we need to make sure at least each and every member in the hall can have something to say. So let us try to be brief with our questions and also not to ask so many questions. Let us have an opportunity for everyone to ask.
Thank you very much, Ivan. It's only unfortunate that you decided to give that announcement now. Because I had prepared my 8 questions, but because you have guided very well, I will only make a comment and also request that the presenters before could elaborate better. My brother Kayonde has insisted on the general specifics, but in terms of governance, I think before we talk of the setup and all that, I think governance of this whole program, of this whole fund, I seek the indulgence of the presenters before to make it one of those areas that must be emphasized, because as the delegate from the Philippines has highlighted, it's not a magic bullet. We spend a lot of time speaking about what are the benefits, what are the things that we want to see, but we have not delved into the governance structures. And I think this is somewhere we might need to emphasize. The second one is on the management of this fund. We have spent some time to talk on the sources of funding, but we may or may not be alive, and I again stand to be corrected, we may or may not be alive to the factors that affect management. Our colleague from the Philippines, and as tomorrow he might elaborate further, has told you that they have a very old fund since 77. But since 1977, it has evolved over time. We are trying to get the best practices of managing a fund or a program. I didn't see that come out clearly when we were presenting. And while I agree with my colleague and the delegate from Uganda, Mr. Kayonde, on a unified kind of program within the ESC, I strongly believe that this is the beginning of such a discussion. And whereas we might go back to our different governments, it's important for us to take notes from here and say maybe we agreed on some certain positions, isn't it? Because if we can tell our superiors or our ministers responsible for labor or the colleagues who are going to initiate this, I think it goes a long way, because we are the ones who are technical enough to know what it is that is required. So
I just wanted to agree with my colleague there. And with those very few remarks, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. That's well noted, and I've just been sharing with a colleague from Philippines, and tomorrow, in his presentation, we are going to have the fund management bit. He says it's already included, so I hope... okay, he will include it. So,